Elena had always believed that life moved quietly, like the gentle tides along the coast of Palermo. She lived simply, unnoticed, like the faint glow of a lantern left burning after midnight. Her world was books, soft music, and the comforting routines of the small flower shop she worked in. Yet destiny often chooses the quiet ones to witness the loudest storms, and Elena was about to step into a storm she never saw coming. It began on an evening when the sky was bruised with fading purple, and the last customers were leaving the shop with hurried footsteps. A cold wind carried whispers of trouble, though Elena didn't recognize them. She was too focused on arranging the last bouquet, brushing petals with delicate fingers, unaware that someone had been watching her for weeks. A man, a shadow, a presence. Across the street, leaning against a black car that didn't belong to the neighborhood, he stood. Quiet, still observing her. He had the kind of stillness that wasn't peaceful but dangerous. The kind of silence that carried power. Lorenzo. His name was enough to silence rooms. To command fear. To bend laws that others spent their lives obeying. He was the youngest and most feared leader of the Marconí Mafia family, born into a world where loyalty was blood and betrayal was death. People rarely saw him in daylight. He preferred the cloak of darkness, where he could blend into the city's hidden corners. Yet tonight, he wasn't here for business. He was here for her, Elena. Weeks earlier, he had walked past her shop by accident. If someone like Lorenzo ever truly did anything by accident, a chase, a betrayal, a gunshot wound, he had been bleeding, searching for cover, and stumbled into her quiet world of flowers and soft lights. She never knew who he was. She simply helped him. No questions. No fear. Just kindness. He never forgot. And Lorenzo Marconí was a man who always repaid his debts. But when he returned days later and saw her again, something shifted. He didn't feel gratitude. He felt something dangerously close to longing. He felt the warmth of a world he had never belonged to. Tonight, he stepped out of the shadows. Tonight, he crossed the street. Inside the shop, Elena was unaware of his approach. She closed the register, humming softly, until the door's bell chimed. A sound so normal, yet it made her heart jump. She turned, expecting a late customer, but the man who entered felt like a storm wrapped in a tailored black coat. His presence filled the room before his voice did. The air tightened. The silence stretched. Elena felt it first, a heavy, magnetic pull she couldn't name. Lorenzo didn't smile. He rarely did. But tonight, there was a softness in his eyes that almost looked like a memory. He stepped closer. Carefully, almost too carefully for a man known for violence. He allowed himself one slow breath, taking in the scent of lavender, roses, and the faint sweetness that seemed tied directly to her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, finally, his voice, low, calm, controlled, broke the silence. "I need a bouquet," he said. Elena nodded quickly, unaware that this was the beginning of the end of her quiet world. "What occasion?" she asked gently. Lorenzo paused. He had never bought flowers in his life. But tonight, he needed an excuse, any excuse, to be near her. "A gift," he said, "for someone important." Elena smiled softly, unaware that the person he meant was standing right in front of him. As she prepared the bouquet, Lorenzo watched her with the quiet intensity of a man trying to memorize a moment. Her calm movements, her soft humming, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. He wasn't supposed to feel this. He wasn't supposed to want this. He was a man made of secrets, danger, and shadows. She was a woman made of light. Two worlds that should never touch. Yet destiny was already binding them together. And far outside the shop, hidden in the alleyways, eyes were watching. Not Lorenzo's men. Not Elena's neighbors. Enemies. Elena was unaware. Lorenzo was aware, but didn't yet know how deep the threat ran. Tonight was supposed to be a simple visit. A quiet moment. But fate had decided otherwise. As Elena handed him the bouquet with a gentle smile, a single gunshot cracked the air somewhere nearby. Sharp, distant, but close enough to change everything. Elena gasped. Lorenzo's expression hardened instantly. The storm had found them. And this was only the beginning. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the quiet streets like a warning whispered by fate itself. Elena froze, her breath suspended in her chest, her fingers still lightly touching the bouquet she had just handed Lorenzo. The petals trembled. So did she. Outside, the night that had felt peaceful moments ago now felt sharp, watchful, dangerous. Lorenzo did not move at first. He listened, measured, calculated. Years of surviving ambushes had trained his instincts into something almost supernatural. He could read danger the way others read a familiar book. And right now, danger was not on its way. It was already here. Elena finally found her voice, though it came out small and frightened. What was that? Lorenzo's eyes shifted to her, dark, protective, and suddenly colder than a winter ocean. Stay behind the counter, he said quietly. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command delivered with the calmness of someone who had faced death more times than he could remember. He stepped toward the shop's window, careful and controlled. Elena watched him, confusion mixing with fear. This wasn't the behavior of an ordinary customer. This was a man who knew the language of violence. Outside, nothing moved. Nothing seemed out of place. But Lorenzo knew better. Shadows often hid the deadliest things. He took a slow breath, his mind racing through possibilities. The gunshot hadn't been meant for him. He would have sensed a trailing car, a watcher, a tail. No, this shot was a signal. A message. A test. Someone was letting him know they knew where he was. Or worse, where she was. Elena took a hesitant step toward him. Should we call the police? She whispered. Lorenzo turned slightly, just enough for her to see the look in his eyes, the kind of look that told her the police would not fix whatever was happening outside. No, he said softly. That won't help. Elena didn't understand. Not yet. But she could feel it. The shift, the heaviness, the sense that the world she thought she lived in was suddenly much larger and far more dangerous. She swallowed, her voice trembling. Then what was that? Lorenzo hesitated. For a moment, he considered lying. Telling her it was nothing, that it was fireworks or a car backfiring. But something inside him refused to insult her intelligence or her kindness. Few people had ever offered him genuine kindness. Even fewer without wanting something in return. So he told her the truth, at least part of it. An enemy, he said. Someone sending a warning. Elena's heart dropped. Enemy, she repeated slowly. Why would someone? Her words dissolved into silence as Lorenzo stepped closer. Not threatening, but protective, like a storm positioning itself between her and the world. Elena, he said quietly. You helped me once. More than you know. That means something in my world. But helping me also draws attention. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. Your world, she whispered. Lorenzo exhaled, his jaw tightening. He had always lived in shadows, but tonight, he felt them creeping closer, wrapping around Elena in ways he never intended. Before he could explain more, another sound sliced through the night. Not a gunshot this time. A footstep. Soft. Deliberate. Lorenzo reacted instantly. He grabbed Elena gently but firmly by the wrist. Get down, he said. He pulled her behind the counter, lowering her until they were hidden from the window. Elena's pulse raced so fast she felt dizzy. What's happening? Who are you? She breathed. Lorenzo's voice dropped to a whisper, steady, controlled, lethal. Someone who doesn't want you hurt. Another footstep. Closer. Elena covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure whoever was outside could hear it. Lorenzo reached inside his coat. And Elena saw it. A gun. Not a small one. Not something owned by a regular man. It was cold, black, and looked like it had seen things she could never imagine. Her breath hitched. You're armed. He looked at her, not with guilt, but with a truth he was tired of hiding. Elena, he said quietly, I'm not who you think I am. Before she could respond, a shadow moved past the window. Lorenzo reacted instantly. He rose just enough to see through the glass. Quick, sharp, precise. His eyes narrowed. A man stood across the street, staring directly at the shop. Not hiding. Not running. Just watching. Sending a message. When he saw Lorenzo, he smiled. A cold, empty smile, before disappearing into an alley. Lorenzo lowered himself beside Elena again. He's gone, he murmured. But this was not good news. Not in his world. Elena's voice was shaky. Who was that? Lorenzo looked at her, really looked, realizing that no matter what he chose, her life had already changed. A warning, he said. From the Valerio crime syndicate. She blinked, confused. Crime syndicate? He nodded once, slowly. They're my enemies. Elena's lips trembled, her world spinning. Then who are you? she whispered. Lorenzo inhaled deeply, knowing this was the moment everything broke open. The moment he pulled her into the darkness he never wanted her to see. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but unshakable. "I'm Lorenzo Marconí," he said, "head of the Marconí Mafia family." Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Irreversible. Elena stared at him, stunned, unable to breathe for a moment. He expected fear, terror, maybe even disgust. But what he saw instead was heartbreak. Not for herself, but for him. I helped the Mafia king," she whispered in disbelief. Lorenzo lowered his eyes, for the first time looking almost vulnerable. "You saved my life," he said, "and now I need to protect yours." The street outside grew quiet again, but the silence was no longer peaceful. It was the silence before a war, and Elena had just become a part of it. For a long moment, Elena didn't speak. She couldn't. The flower shop, her sanctuary, her world of calm colors and gentle scents, no longer felt safe. The walls seemed thinner, the windows too exposed. Even the soft glow of the string lights above her head felt like they illuminated her far too clearly. She sat behind the counter, knees drawn slightly inward, hands trembling as she pressed them against the cold tiles. Lorenzo stood beside her, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the weight of his presence. A presence that suddenly carried far more meaning, far more danger, than she ever imagined. Her thoughts raced. Pieces of the truth fell into place one by one. The mysterious wound he had when she first met him. The shadows that always seemed to follow him. The sharp, guarded look in his eyes. The way he moved, always alert, always aware. And tonight, the gun. It all made sense now. Too much sense. Finally, Elena found the strength to whisper, You're a Mafia boss." Lorenzo didn't deny it. He simply held her gaze, steady and calm, like a man who had long accepted what he was. "Yes." The single word hung in the air between them like the final toll of a distant bell. Heavy, unavoidable. Elena looked down, her breath trembling. Everything in her life had been simple, predictable, ordinary. And now this. A man of shadows standing in her shop, telling her she was now entangled in a world of blood and revenge she never asked for. But what terrified her most wasn't that he had enemies. It was that those enemies knew she existed. She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "Why would they come here? Why would they follow you to me?" The pain in Lorenzo's expression was subtle but unmistakable. "Because you helped me. Because you showed me kindness. Because I came back for you." But he didn't say any of that aloud. Instead, he answered in the way a man like him always would. Honest, but controlled. "They want leverage," he said. "People like me, we don't have many weaknesses. So when they find something we care about." He stopped himself. Elena's head lifted slightly. "Something you care about?" she echoed, her voice soft but stunned. Lorenzo looked away. Not out of shame. Lorenzo Marconí was not a man who felt shame. But he felt something else tonight. Something he had no name for. Something he wasn't supposed to feel. He finally spoke. "You helped me without knowing who I was," he said quietly. "People like me, we don't forget that. And neither do our enemies." A cold shiver ran down Elena's spine. This was real. Too real. She stood slowly, her legs unsteady, one hand gripping the edge of the counter for support. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What am I supposed to do?" Lorenzo rose as well, but he kept a careful distance, close enough to protect her, far enough not to overwhelm her. "You pack a bag," he said softly, "and you leave with me." The words hit her like a lightning strike. "Leave?" Elena repeated, shocked. "Leave my home. Leave everything." Lorenzo didn't flinch. "They've seen you," he said. "That makes you a target. I won't let you stay here alone." Elena stepped back, her heart pounding. "And go where, Lorenzo? With who?" "A mafia leader I barely know." The pain in her voice cut deeper than any weapon ever could. Lorenzo's jaw clenched, not out of anger, but because her fear mattered to him more than he expected. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly. "I know," Elena whispered, her voice unexpectedly soft. "But they will." Those 3 words carved into Lorenzo like a blade. He took a slow breath, deep, controlled, before continuing. "Elena, I can protect you, but I can't protect you from a distance." She turned away, running a trembling hand through her hair as she tried to steady her breath. She had never been inside danger, never been close to violence. The most dramatic thing in her life had been a broken vase or a late delivery. And now she was being asked to leave everything behind in one night. She felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. "This is my life," she whispered. "My shop, my home, everything." Lorenzo didn't move closer, but his voice softened in a way she had never heard before. "I know," he said, "but your life matters more than your shop, more than this place. If you stay here alone tonight, I won't forgive myself." Elena turned to look at him, and for the first time since meeting him, she saw something unexpected in his expression. Fear. Not for himself. For her. It made her chest tighten. A long silence fell between them as the weight of the decision settled on her shoulders. The world outside the shop was quiet, but the quiet felt fragile, like glass that could shatter at any moment. Finally, Elena exhaled shakily. "If I go with you," she began, her voice trembling, "what will happen to me?" Lorenzo answered without hesitation. "I will keep you alive," he said, "no matter what it takes." Her heart skipped. There were many things she feared tonight. Lorenzo was not one of them. Slowly, hesitantly, Elena nodded. "All right," she whispered. "I'll go." Lorenzo's breath left him in a way he couldn't hide, relief mixed with something deeper, something dangerous. He moved toward the door, scanning the street one more time before securing the lock. "Pack only what you need," he said. "We don't have long." Elena took one last look at her flower shop, the soft lights, the scattered petals, the life she had built with her own two hands. A life that would no longer be hers. Not after tonight. She turned toward the back room, her steps slow, heavy, uncertain. And as she disappeared behind the curtain, Lorenzo allowed his mask to slip for just a moment. He closed his eyes. He clenched his jaw. And he whispered to himself the truth he wasn't ready to say aloud. "Forgive me, Elena, for bringing my darkness to your light." Outside, far beyond the glow of the shop's window, the Valerio syndicate moved through the shadows. Silent, patient, waiting. Tonight wasn't the end. It was the beginning. A beginning soaked in danger, fate, and a love neither of them were ready for. Elena's hands shook as she moved through the back room, the small space suddenly feeling foreign and unfamiliar. She opened drawers she had opened 1,000 times before, yet tonight, every movement felt heavy, unreal, wrong. Her mind was still catching up with the truth she had just heard. Mafia. Enemies. Danger. Her. She grabbed a small bag, the one she used for weekend trips, and placed it on the table, forcing herself to breathe steadily as she folded a change of clothes, then another. But her fingers trembled with each piece of fabric she touched. Everything she packed felt like a goodbye. Outside the room, she could hear Lorenzo's quiet footsteps, slow, controlled, scanning the perimeter of her shop with the precision of someone who expected danger at every corner. As she placed her phone charger inside the bag, she paused. Her reflection caught her in the small mirror above the table. The woman staring back at her wasn't the same woman who'd opened the shop this morning. Her eyes held fear, but they also held something else. Strength she never knew she had. She zipped the bag closed, took one deep breath, and stepped out. Lorenzo stood by the front door, his gun now concealed beneath his coat, his posture sharp, alert, ready. When he saw her, some tension in his shoulders softened, but only slightly. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Elena nodded, though her heart pounded so hard she could barely hear her own voice. "Yes." Lorenzo studied her for a moment, her fear, her bravery, her trembling hands, but he didn't question her. He only opened the door a few inches and peered outside. The street was still, too still. He motioned her closer, stepping partially in front of her as they walked out, the cold air slicing into her warm shop like an unwelcome intrusion. Elena instinctively moved closer to him. Not touching, but seeking the safety of his presence. She had never walked beside danger before, but tonight, danger walked beside her. A sleek black car waited across the road, engine off, windows tinted. Lorenzo scanned both ends of the street again before guiding her toward it. "Stay close," he murmured. She obeyed. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound felt like a threat. When they reached the car, Lorenzo opened the passenger door for her. His movements were swift but strangely gentle, a contrast Elena didn't know was possible in someone who lived in his world. "In," he said softly. She slid into the seat. The car smelled faintly of leather and cedar, a scent that felt both expensive and intimidating. Lorenzo closed the door behind her and walked around to the driver's side, scanning the street with every step. The moment he started the engine, the hum of power beneath them felt like a shift in fate. Elena clutched her bag tightly. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely steady. "A safe house," Lorenzo replied, eyes on the road. "One no one knows about." She swallowed. "Do your people know you're here?" "With me?" Lorenzo's hands tightened subtly on the wheel. "No, and they won't." She turned to him, confused. "Why?" He didn't look at her, but his jaw clenched in a way that told her the truth was heavier than he wanted her to carry. "Because the fewer people who know about you, the safer you are," he said. "My world is built on secrets. You are now my most important one." Elena felt her breath catch. "It looks abandoned," she whispered. "That's the point." He parked the car near the tree line and stepped out, quickly circling to her side. When he opened the door, Elena hesitated before stepping into the cold night air. The forest was silent. So silent it felt unnatural. Lorenzo scanned the surroundings before guiding her toward the cabin. His hand didn't touch her, but hovered close. Close enough that she could feel warmth radiating from him. He unlocked the door with a small metal key and pushed it open. The interior was dark until he reached for a switch, revealing a modest space. Wooden floors, a leather sofa, a fireplace untouched for months, and a small kitchen tucked into the corner. Elena stepped inside cautiously. It wasn't luxurious like she expected from someone of his status. It was quiet, almost lonely. "This is your safe house?" she asked softly. "My only one," he replied. "I built it myself. No records. No connections. No one has stepped foot here but me." Elena's eyes drifted across the room again. Somehow she believed him. There was no trace of anyone else. No photos. No personal items. Nothing but the faint smell of cedar and old silence. "I'll check the perimeter," Lorenzo said, turning toward the door. "Lock it behind me." Elena's fingers trembled as she turned the lock. The moment the sound clicked through the cabin, her knees threatened to give out. The fear she had held together for the past hour rushed forward like a flood. Gunshots. Glass shattering. Masked men. Death in the shadows. She pressed a hand to her mouth as tears burned hot at the corners of her eyes. "What is happening to my life? How did I end up here?" She sank onto the edge of the sofa, breathing in shaky gasps, trying to ground herself in the quiet. A few minutes later, the door opened softly. Lorenzo stepped inside, brushing leaves from his coat. His expression softened the moment he saw her, her trembling shoulders, her tear-stained cheeks, the fear she couldn't hide. "Elena," he said gently. She shook her head, wiping at her tears. "I'm sorry, I'm not usually like this. I don't understand any of this." Lorenzo stepped closer, slow, deliberate, giving her space if she needed it. "You've been through a war tonight," he said quietly. Anyone would be shaking. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you hurt?" He glanced at his sleeve. Dried blood stained it in dark patterns. "Not mine," he said. Elena swallowed hard. She didn't know if that made her feel better or worse. A silence drifted between them before she finally asked the question she had been holding back. "Lorenzo, why are they after me? I don't matter in your world." His jaw tightened. "You matter because you matter to me." Elena froze. Lorenzo realized what he had said only after the words left his mouth. He looked away for a moment, exhaling slowly. "I didn't mean." He stopped himself. No, he did mean it. He just wasn't ready to admit it out loud. "Elena," he continued, voice low and steady. "I came back to your shop because I wanted to see you. Not because I needed anything from you. And the Valerio Syndicate knew that." Her breath caught. "But how? How could they possibly know about me?" Lorenzo raised his eyes to hers. "Because they've been following me for weeks," he said. "Watching. Waiting for a weakness." "A weakness?" Elena whispered. "Yes," Lorenzo replied softly. "Me caring about something, or someone." Elena felt her heart twist painfully. "And you think that someone is me?" His silence was the answer. A heavy quiet settled over the room. Charged, fragile, dangerous in a different way than bullets and car chases. Elena stood slowly, taking a shaky step closer to him. "Lorenzo," she whispered, "I don't know your world. I don't know your enemies or your rules. But I do know this. I didn't ask for any of this. and I don't know what happens next." He met her gaze, and for the first time, Elena saw the truth behind his eyes. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. "What happens next," Lorenzo said quietly, "is that I keep you alive. Whatever it takes." A chill ran through her, not of fear, but something warmer, deeper, more dangerous. She opened her mouth to speak, but a sudden noise outside cut through the cabin. A crunch. A snap. Footsteps. Lorenzo's expression hardened instantly. He moved in front of her, eyes sharp, muscles tense. "Elena," he whispered, voice turning cold and lethal. "Get behind me." Outside the safe house. Someone was here. Someone who wasn't supposed to know this place existed. The forest outside the cabin had been silent for hours, a kind of deep, untouched stillness that felt ancient. But now, that stillness was broken. Elena heard it clearly. A crunch. Another. Heavy. Slow. Deliberate. Someone was out there. Her breath hitched as she instinctively moved behind Lorenzo, her fingers gripping the back of his coat. His body shifted, subtly shielding her as he reached beneath his jacket. The cold metal of his gun glinted faintly under the dim cabin light. "Elena," he murmured without turning around, "stay low. Do not move unless I tell you to." She nodded, though her legs felt as though they might give out beneath her. Lorenzo stepped toward the window, careful not to cross into view, listening. He could distinguish animals from humans by sound alone, and the cadence of those steps, unmistakable. A man, but not moving like an attacker, not charging, not stealthy either. Someone approaching with confidence, too much confidence to be an assassin. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Elena held her breath. Then, 3 slow knocks on the door. Not rushed, not frantic, measured, as if the person on the other side wasn't afraid, as if he expected the door to open. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "Elena," he whispered, "go to the fireplace and stay behind the chair." She obeyed without question, crouching behind the large wooden armchair tucked near the hearth. From there, she could see only Lorenzo's silhouette, broad shoulders, rigid posture, gun in his hand, every line of his body radiating danger. He approached the door, stopping at the frame. He did not open it. He spoke through the wood, voice low and ice sharp. "Whoever you are, you have 5 seconds to explain why you're on my property." A pause. Then a voice answered, male, deep, accented, slightly amused. "Relax, Lorenzo. If I wanted you dead, the cabin would already be ashes." Elena's heart lurched. Someone who knew Lorenzo. Someone bold enough to speak like that. Lorenzo's grip tightened on the gun, though only someone who knew him well could see the shift. "Step away from the door," Lorenzo commanded. "Hands where I can see them." Another amused exhale. "As you wish." Lorenzo opened the door in one swift motion, gun raised and aimed. Moonlight spilled onto the porch, illuminating a tall man dressed in a dark turtleneck and coat, hands lifted casually, in surrender. Sharp features. Cool, intelligent eyes. A faint scar along the jaw. And a calmness that felt familiar. Elena couldn't see his face fully, but Lorenzo's reaction told her everything. His shoulders dropped a fraction. His stance shifted. Not relaxed, but less lethal. "You took your damn time," the stranger said. "I almost froze out here." Lorenzo lowered his gun slightly, though not completely. "How did you find this place, Raphael?" "Raphael." Elena repeated the name silently. The man smirked, lowering his hands casually. "You forget who taught you how to disappear," he said. "You didn't think I'd recognize your handiwork on a cabin you built with your own 2 hands?" Lorenzo didn't smile, but he stepped aside. "Get in." Raphael entered with the ease of someone who had once walked this path many times before. His eyes scanned the cabin, resting briefly on Elena, who remained hidden behind the chair. "Ah," he said softly. "So this is the reason you've been impossible to reach." Elena held her breath. Lorenzo shot him a warning look. "Say another word, and you're walking back to the city." Raphael laughed under his breath and lifted his palms in surrender. "Fine, fine, I'll behave." His tone carried a hint of teasing, but beneath it was something else, a sharp, assessing awareness. A man who observed everything. Lorenzo closed the door, locked it, and turned to Elena. "It's all right," he said. "You can come out." She stood slowly, eyes shifting between the 2 men. Raphael's gaze softened briefly when he saw her trembling. "You must be Elena," he said, voice gentler now. I've heard enough. Elena swallowed. Who are you? An old friend, Lorenzo answered before Raphael could. One of the only people I trust. Raphael lifted a brow. High praise coming from someone who trusts no one. Lorenzo ignored him. Elena stepped closer, though fear still lingered in her chest. Are you like him? She asked quietly. Raphael's smirk faded into something more serious. We share the same world, he answered. But I prefer a quieter corner of it. He looked at Lorenzo. I came because your safe house location leaked. Lorenzo froze. Elena felt her stomach drop. What do you mean, leaked? Lorenzo's voice was low, dangerous. Raphael stepped closer to the table and placed a small black device on it. A tracker. Elena's heart constricted. That was found under the wheel well of your car, Raphael said. They knew exactly where you were going, and they weren't far behind. Elena felt dizzy. Lorenzo stared at the tracker with a cold fury that chilled the room. When, he asked. 20 minutes after you left the shop, Raphael said. I intercepted the signal and came straight here. Elena's hands flew to her mouth. You mean, they followed us the entire time? Raphael nodded grimly. Of course. The ambush on the bridge? That wasn't random. That was your only warning. Lorenzo slammed his fist onto the table, the sound sharp enough to make Elena flinch. I should have checked, he muttered. I should have. Don't, Raphael cut in. You had other priorities. Like keeping her alive. Lorenzo didn't answer. He couldn't, because the guilt inside him was real. Heavy. Raw. Elena stepped forward before she could stop herself. Lorenzo, she whispered, you saved me. If you hadn't. He looked at her then, truly looked. And despite the blood on his sleeve, the fury in his eyes, and the threat closing in around them, the emotion that flickered across his face was unmistakable. Fear. For her. Raphael watched the exchange quietly before clearing his throat. We don't have long, he said. The Valerio syndicate will realize the tracker went offline. They'll send more men. Elena's pulse quickened. What do we do? She asked. Lorenzo turned to Raphael. We end this, he said. Raphael nodded. I thought you'd say that. Elena's voice wavered. Ended how? Lorenzo stepped closer to her, his presence powerful and steady. By making sure no one ever comes for you again, he said. His words were not a promise. They were a vow drenched in shadow, danger, and something dangerously close to love. The cabin felt smaller now, the air heavier, danger closer. Elena stood between the two men, Lorenzo silent and simmering with controlled fury, Raphael calm but urgent, and she, caught in a world she still didn't understand, yet could no longer escape. Raphael spread a worn map across the wooden table. Elena realized it wasn't just a map. Dark marks, red lines, small notations scribbled in a language she didn't recognize. This wasn't a map for travel. It was a map for survival. Or war. Raphael tapped one spot with his finger. This is where they've been tracking you from. It's a temporary base. Valerio's men never stay in one place longer than they need to. But it's close. Too close. Lorenzo leaned over the map, expression hardened. How many? He asked. 5, maybe 6, Raphael replied. But they're not the real threat. They're the scouts. The ones who followed you from the shop. Elena's heart tightened. So the men who attacked us on the bridge. Were expendable, Raphael finished. Valerio wanted to slow you down, not kill you yet. The words pressed into her chest like a cold blade. Why? She whispered. Why not just end it tonight? Raphael glanced at her, then at Lorenzo. Because they want leverage. And you, Elena. His voice softened. Are the first weakness Lorenzo has ever shown. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. Enough. But Raphael didn't back down. You know it's true. You've never gone back to the same place twice. You've never revisited a civilian. And yet you returned to her shop again, and again. Elena's eyes widened. Lorenzo looked away, shadows deepening along his features. Raphael continued. Valerio saw the change before you did. And he acted on it immediately. Elena felt her throat tighten. She never asked for this. Never asked to become someone's vulnerability. But when she looked at Lorenzo, something inside her whispered that maybe he'd never had someone to protect before, not someone he cared for willingly. Lorenzo straightened. What's the real plan? He asked. Raphael pointed to another mark on the map. We have 2 options. The smart one, or the one you're going to choose. Lorenzo's brow lifted slightly. Elena, Raphael said gently. Go sit for a moment. This next part isn't easy to hear. But Lorenzo shook his head. No, she stays. If this involves her life, she deserves to know everything. Elena swallowed and stayed at the table, hovering close behind Lorenzo like a trembling shadow. Raphael cleared his throat. Option 1. We take Elena far away from the city. Somewhere the Valerio syndicate doesn't operate. A different country. A new identity. She disappears. Elena's breath hitched. Disappear. Lose her home. Her life. Everything. She felt a coldness spread through her chest. And option 2? Lorenzo asked. Raphael hesitated. You strike first. The room felt heavier instantly. Take out the scouts. Destroy their intel. Cut off their communication. Show Valerio you're not hiding. I'm retaliating, Lorenzo finished. Raphael nodded. And you're very good at retaliation. Elena stepped forward, her voice trembling. That sounds dangerous. Lorenzo turned to her, eyes softening. It is. She looked at both men helplessly. But won't that bring more violence? More danger? I don't want anyone hurt. Elena, Lorenzo interrupted gently, taking a small step toward her. The danger is already here. Whether we sit quietly or fight back doesn't change that. His voice lowered. But fighting back means we control what happens next. Raphael leaned back against the table. If we make the first move, Valerio pulls his men back. He reassesses. He steps away from civilians. That buys time. Elena shook her head slowly, trying to make sense of the impossible. And what about me? Lorenzo's gaze shifted to her fully now. Strong. Steady. Unwavering. You stay here, he said. With me. Or with Raphael while I take care of the rest. Elena's eyes widened. You're going out there? Alone. I'm not letting them get close to you again, Lorenzo said, voice rough with emotion. Not after tonight. Raphael crossed his arms. And for the record, if Lorenzo goes in alone, someone will die. Elena's breath quickened. You mean? I mean him, Raphael replied. Her hand flew to her chest. No, you can't. Lorenzo interrupted, voice firm. I will not let them touch you. If someone has to face them, it will be me. Elena shook her head, her voice breaking. But you'll get hurt. Or worse. He closed the remaining distance between them, slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something delicate. His hand lifted halfway, then dropped, as if he wasn't sure if he had the right to touch her. Elena, he said softly, you saw what they're capable of. You know what they want. I won't let fear decide our futures. Her eyes filled with tears. Lorenzo, you don't owe me this. He exhaled deeply. No, he murmured, I don't. But I owe myself something I've never had. A chance to protect something, someone, who matters. The room fell into a bruised silence. Raphael sighed. Well, that confirms it. He's choosing option 2. Lorenzo turned away from Elena just enough to look at Raphael. When do we start? Raphael folded the map. Tonight. In 1 hour. Elena grabbed Lorenzo's sleeve. No. Please, don't leave me again. Not tonight. Not after everything. He turned to her, eyes shadowed with something between pain and longing. I'm not leaving you, he said. I'm fighting for you. But I'm scared, she whispered. He stepped closer, so close her breath caught. So am I, Lorenzo admitted quietly. For the first time in years. His eyes softened. And that should tell you exactly how much you mean to me. Elena's heart broke open. Not from fear. From the weight of a truth she never expected. Because Lorenzo wasn't just protecting her. He was falling for her. And tonight, that love would send him into the fire. The cabin felt like it was holding its breath. Outside, the forest was lost in darkness, the trees standing like silent witnesses to the danger gathering in the night. Inside, the air was thick with tension, unspoken fears, unspoken feelings, unspoken truths that none of them were ready to say aloud. Lorenzo stood at the table with the map, his hands braced against the wood, his head bowed slightly. The light above him cast sharp shadows along his jaw, highlighting the exhaustion and determination etched deep into his features. Raphael prepared weapons quietly, cleaning, loading, checking each one with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. And Elena watched them. She sat on the edge of the sofa, arms wrapped around herself, feeling like she was trapped between two storms. The events of the night swirled in her mind, Gunshots, shattered glass, masked attackers. The fear in Lorenzo's eyes when he told her she mattered. She still didn't understand why, but she felt it. Every time he looked at her, every time he stepped between her and danger, every time his voice softened despite the violence around them. Raphael broke the silence first. You weren't supposed to have weaknesses, Lorenzo? Not you. Lorenzo didn't lift his head. Everyone has weaknesses. Raphael gave a quiet, humorless chuckle. Yes, but not everyone's weaknesses are this beautiful. His eyes flicked toward Elena. Lorenzo shot him a warning look. Raphael lifted both hands. Just an observation. Elena swallowed hard, nerves twisting inside her. Please, she said, voice shaking slightly. Stop talking about me like I'm not here. Raphael softened. Apologies, he murmured. Truly. Lorenzo stepped away from the table, walking toward Elena. His steps were slow, deliberate, as if he was afraid of overwhelming her. When he reached her, he crouched down so they were eye to eye. Elena, he said softly, you're safe here. I promise. But she shook her head. I'm not afraid of this place, she whispered. I'm afraid of you going out there alone. Raphael snorted lightly from behind them. Finally, someone who tells him the obvious. Lorenzo ignored him. Elena, he said gently, I've lived my entire life fighting men like Valerio. I know their tactics, their traps, their steps. I can predict them before they breathe. Her eyes glistened. But that doesn't make you invincible. His voice softened even further. No, he said. But knowing you're here gives me a reason to survive. The words stole her breath. She didn't know if she was supposed to respond. She didn't know how. Before she could speak, Raphael cleared his throat. Hate to interrupt the moment, he said. But we need to move before Valerio's men regroup. Lorenzo stood, his expression slipping back into the hardened mask of a Mafia leader preparing for war. Elena, he said gently, you'll stay with Raphael. He won't let anything happen to you. She stood too, her voice trembling. And you? What happens to you? Lorenzo hesitated. Something flickered across his face, vulnerability, fear, longing. Then he stepped closer. I'll come back, he whispered. You don't know that, she said, tears filling her voice. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek, a gesture so gentle it broke something inside her. I do, he said. Because I promised you I would. A single tear escaped and slid down her cheek. Lorenzo's thumb caught it before it fell. Raphael looked away as if giving them a moment. I can't lose someone else, Elena whispered. Lorenzo froze. Someone else. Someone she lost before. Pain flickered across her features. Pain he didn't know yet. Pain he suddenly needed to understand. Elena, he whispered, who did you lose? She looked up at him, her voice small. My brother. Lorenzo's chest tightened. How? She swallowed. Her voice cracked. Violence. Wrong place, wrong time. They never found who did it. Lorenzo's throat constricted. Elena's fear wasn't just fear. It was memory. It was trauma. It was a wound that had never healed. And he was dragging her back into the world that took her brother. Elena, he whispered, I'm so sorry. She shook her head. I don't want to lose you too. His heart stopped. It was the first time she said it out loud, subtle, trembling, but real. Lose you too. She cared, more than she wanted to admit. Lorenzo cupped her face with both hands now, something desperate and raw in his touch. You won't, he said. I swear it. I will come back to you. Raphael stepped forward. Time's up, he said softly. We move. Lorenzo slowly lowered his hands, but his eyes never left Elena's. Raphael placed a hand on Lorenzo's shoulder. You're not doing this alone, he said. Not this time. Lorenzo nodded once. He turned to Elena for the final time before leaving. When I'm gone, he said quietly, follow Raphael's instructions. Lock the door. Stay away from the windows. And no matter what you hear, do not come outside. Her lips trembled. Lorenzo. He took a step back, as if forcing himself to move away from her. I'll be back, he repeated. Then he turned, grabbed his gun, and walked toward the door. Raphael picked up a second gun and followed. The door opened. Cold air swept in. Lorenzo paused on the threshold, just long enough to meet Elena's eyes again. Then he disappeared into the night. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Elena collapsed onto the sofa, her hands shaking violently, tears spilling down her cheeks. And somewhere deep in the forest, two men slipped into the darkness. One driven by duty, the other by loyalty, and one of them fighting not for survival, but for love. The forest swallowed Lorenzo and Raphael whole. Darkness coated every path, every branch, every breath of wind. To Elena, left behind in the cabin, the forest felt suffocating. But to Lorenzo, it felt familiar. A battlefield waiting to be claimed. Raphael walked a few steps behind him, moving soundlessly, scanning the trees with the awareness of someone who had lived through too many ambushes. His voice broke the silence after several long minutes. "You're walking too fast." Lorenzo didn't slow down. "We don't have time." "You're not thinking clearly," Raphael added. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "I'm thinking perfectly. You're thinking emotionally." Lorenzo stopped, turned, and in the faint moonlight, Raphael saw it. The truth Lorenzo had been trying to hide. He was terrified. Not of the fight. Not of death. He was afraid for her. Raphael sighed, stepping closer. "You care about Elena. That's not weakness. But if you fight with your heart instead of your head tonight, you'll die." Lorenzo's fingers curled around his gun. "I'm not dying," he said flatly. "Not tonight. Not while she's waiting." Raphael held his gaze, seeing the storm inside his friend. The fire, the fear, the determination. Finally, he nodded once. "Then let's be smart." They continued through the trees until distant lights flickered between the trunks. Raphael whispered, "There. The outpost." Lorenzo crouched behind a fallen log and observed. A warehouse-like building sat in the clearing, metal walls rusted with age. Two cars parked outside. A generator hummed. Smoke rose faintly from a small fire barrel beside the entrance. Three men stood guard, talking quietly. Two more moved in and out of the building. A total of 5. Just like Raphael predicted. Lorenzo's expression hardened. "They're relaxed," he murmured. "They think they got me on the bridge." Raphael smirked. "Let's prove them wrong." Lorenzo scanned the perimeter. He noted. 1 guard pacing. 2 by the door. 1 in the far corner, half asleep. 1 inside, visible through a cracked window. He spoke under his breath. "Your shot's cleaner on the left." Raphael nodded. "Agreed. You take the door. I take all of them." Raphael scoffed quietly. "Of course you do." Lorenzo didn't answer. His breathing slowed, his senses sharpening into lethal focus. He wasn't the man Elena saw in the shop. Not gentle, not conflicted, not vulnerable. Here, he was the Mafia king. Here, he was the predator. And the men in the clearing were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Raphael loaded his weapon. "You remember the signal?" Lorenzo replied with a single nod. Raphael disappeared into the trees. Lorenzo stayed low, moving silently across the forest floor. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. He had hunted men like these for years. But tonight was different. Elena's face flashed in his mind. The tears in her eyes, the fear in her voice, the warmth of her hand against his skin. His jaw tightened. No one touches her. No one threatens her. Not while I live. A faint whistle cut through the air. The signal. Lorenzo moved instantly. He stepped out of the shadows, firing once, clean, silent, precise. The guard by the corner fell before he even knew what hit him. The 2 by the door reached for their guns, but Lorenzo was already moving, closing the distance like a hunter chasing prey. His movements were sharp, fluid, merciless. A blow to the throat, a twist of the wrist, a silent takedown into the dirt. The 3rd guard stumbled backward, confused, raising his weapon. A shot rang out. Raphael shot. The man collapsed before he could aim. Lorenzo didn't stop. He kicked open the warehouse door, gun raised. The last guard inside froze, eyes widening in recognition. Lorenzo. But the name never finished. A single shot ended his sentence. Silence fell. Thick, heavy, final. Raphael entered behind him, wiping his hands on his coat. "Well," he muttered, "that was fast." Lorenzo surveyed the room. A single table, scattered papers, a laptop, wires, a map with several red circles. One of the circles marked the coordinates of the cabin. Lorenzo's chest tightened with anger. "They knew more than I thought," he growled. Raphael approached the table and began gathering the documents. "We'll burn all of this. They won't trace anything." But Lorenzo wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at a note pinned to the board. A simple piece of paper. 1 sentence, written in block letters. "Bring the girl. Leave the king alive." Raphael looked over Lorenzo's shoulder. Oh damn. Lorenzo's grip tightened, the paper crumpling under his fingers. It wasn't about territory. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about power. Valerio wanted Elena. Alive. Fear. Real. Raw. And violent. Punched through Lorenzo's chest. We have to go, he said, voice low. Now. Raphael nodded. Back to the cabin? Yes. But Lorenzo, if they wanted her, why didn't they take her tonight? Lorenzo froze. Raphael's face darkened as realization struck him too. They weren't here to take her, he whispered. They were here to track you. A chill ran through Lorenzo's spine. Which means they already know. That she's with you, Raphael finished. And that you'd run to your safest place. A cold gust of wind swept through the broken door. Lorenzo's heart dropped. They're going to the cabin. Raphael swore under his breath. How many men do you think? Not scouts, Lorenzo replied. Not amateurs. He looked toward the forest, his pulse thundering. They're sending their best. Raphael's voice hardened. Then we run. Lorenzo didn't respond. He was already moving. Faster than before, faster than he ever had. Tearing back into the forest, his breath sharp, shallow, adrenaline-filled. Branches whipped against his coat. Roots clawed at his feet. The night blurred around him. He didn't care. Only one thought remained. Only one truth burned through him. Elena is alone. And the wolves are coming. Watch out for part 2.